Throughout the course of this sermon, you will hear me say one thing in two ways. And just so that we all have our ears primed to what that is, I'm just going to come out and say it. Number one, I don't always believe in the resurrection, but I do want to be living resurrection. Let me say that again. I don't always believe in the resurrection, but I do want to be living resurrection. Number two, we are made whole by the people who hold us. We are made whole by the people who hold us. Now, we're going to talk more about those things in a moment. But first, this sermon requires some help. I have a puzzle. It has 100 pieces, and I am in need of a few people. These are the corner pieces. I'm in need of a few people to help me. I need 4 people. I would love to have maybe someone who's kind of in the ages of 8 to 12, someone who's kind of in the ages of like a teenager range, maybe someone in their 20s and 30s. Okay, come on. Okay, 2. Okay, I need 3. Okay, there we go. 4. That works. All right, get up here, Lucy. You can get up here too. We'll have a safe here. Okay, your job is to make easy. We're good. Just here. Share with Lake. Here we go. All right, your job is to make as much of this puzzle as you can. It's a Beanie Babies puzzle. So good luck. Let's see how far you can go. And Lynn, could you grab another chair for Lucien? Rob's got it. Perfect. Bring it on up. Okay, but the one rule is you got to be quiet, though. Thank you. Okay, we'll see how this goes. I always feel like there should be a surprise element in every sermon. Even the preacher shouldn't know what's coming. Now let's talk about today's scripture. Today's scripture tells us a story of wholeness. It's a story of resurrection. Jesus comes walking into town, and the town is radically changed as a result. Nain is a small town in Galilee, about 50 miles south of Capernaum, where Jesus was just visiting. And he enters the town, and he notices a large crowd and a funeral procession underway. At the center is a woman, a widow. Microphone is off. At the center of this crowd is a woman, a widow. Jesus sees her and has compassion on her. Jesus approaches the woman's dead son, reaches out, touches him, a major no-no in a clean, unclean binary culture, and he says, "Young man, I say to you, rise." And the story tells us that the dead man sat up and began to speak. Something dead has been brought back to life. Someone's weeping has been turned into rejoicing. Something broken has been made whole. Now, before we look closer at the details of this story, let's talk about what just happened, that R word, resurrection. I have a confession to make. It's the one that I hinted at already in my opening statements. When it comes to stories of resurrection in the Bible, I am a bit skeptical. And I don't think I'm the only one. This is Middle Church. Now, I'm not saying that God can't do anything, that God won't do anything, because God is God and she's super bad. But I am saying that my faith and my doubt, they don't find themselves in some sort of a rivalry against science and philosophy and reason. In fact, it's science and philosophy and reason that invite me into the deepest mysteries of what it means to exist, to stand in awe and to wonder at the world around me. Too often it's religion versus science. I find them doing a beautiful dance. Now, I've also seen so many more people die than I've ever seen come back to life. I read the stories about dead bodies coming back to life, but I'm yet to encounter one for myself. And this isn't some sort of I've got to see it to believe it doubting Thomas syndrome. This is a problem I have with what resurrection typically fundamentally means. It becomes too often a literal event that must be believed in order to define who's in and who's out, or it's some sort of afterlife insurance that allows us to avoid this world as we dream about the next one that might be coming. Yeah, too often resurrection feels like an escape from this world, a dichotomy between the supernatural and the plain old natural. You see, I want to dig my toes into the dirt of the natural and perhaps find something super that's been here the entire time. God was in this place, and I just didn't know it. But resurrection, Jim, what exactly are you saying about resurrection? Do you deny the resurrection? Well, a few years ago, my friend Pete Rollins, a storyteller and philosopher, was asked this exact question. Do you deny the resurrection? And I find myself leaning on his response for my own. Do I deny the resurrection? Well, everyone who knows me knows that I deny the resurrection. Of course I deny the resurrection. I deny the resurrection every time I close my eyes to the cries of the oppressed and I participate in systems of injustice. I deny the resurrection every time I walk past a person experiencing homelessness and ignore their humanity. I deny the resurrection every time I let my white, cis, male privilege put me one step ahead of someone else. Of course I deny the resurrection. But sometimes, to echo my friend Pete, there are moments when I affirm the resurrection. When I stand up for those who are forced to live on their knees. When I speak for those who've had their tongues torn out. And when I cry with those who have no more tears to shed. In those moments, I am affirming a resurrection. I don't always believe in the resurrection, but I always want to be living resurrection. Because I believe that resurrection is less about dead bodies coming back to life and more about individuals and communities being made whole. You see, the whole Bible is true, and some of it even happened. Resurrection is something true. Resurrection is something necessary. Resurrection is something essential to what it means for the moral arc of the universe to bend towards justice. Resurrection is not something you believe in. Resurrection is something you live in. I don't know how to raise a dead body, but I do know how to practice myself some resurrection. Yeah, be made whole. Hold the world around you in such a way that wholeness is restored. We are made whole by the people who hold us. That is resurrection. And so this is what I think is happening when we look closer at the story that Luke is telling. The resurrection that we see, it's not just a woman's son coming back to life. The resurrection that we see is the woman being made whole. Her place in the community is restored. Her well-being is assured. Let me explain what I mean by this. The text tells us a couple important details about this woman. First, this is her only son. Second, she is a widow. There is no Social Security. There is no retirement fund. There is no Medicare for this woman. A widow's life is dependent on the life of her children, specifically her sons. And this woman, this widow, finds herself alone. And so she weeps not just for the loss of her son, but for the reality that she finds herself in. A person without a support system and no place in society. In the book of James, when we read that we are to care for the orphan and the widow, we are being called to care for those who are pushed to the margins of society, those who have no shoulder upon which to rest their weary head. And here Jesus encounters a widow. And the resurrection at the center of this story, It's not just the woman's son, it's widow now has a place. A woman made whole, a community made whole, a person who had been living on the margin is brought to the center. A person with no way forward is given a horizon of hope. I don't know about you, but I could use some of those horizons of hope when I read the headlines in our world today. I don't know about you, but when I see the headlines of too many people pushed to the margins, I am waiting for some resurrection that's not just dead bodies, but it's the recentering of all of those who are fully human but too often are seen as less than. That is what it means to practice resurrection. This woman embraces her son. She feels her son's arms around her, and she is made whole. Because we are made whole by the people who hold us. And this being made whole is what resurrection is all about. Now, I'm not interested in the arguments about whether resurrection did or did not happen. I'll save those for Thanksgiving dinner with my family. I am only interested in the ways that resurrection can keep happening in our world today. All year long, but especially this month, we will be celebrating the love and inclusion of gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and queer people, a month filled with pride as we celebrate who God has made all of us to be. But too often, as we are all well aware of, our LGBTQ friends are pushed to the margins, intimidated by homophobic bullies as they walk hand in hand, judged as they enter places of worship, and questioned simply for using the bathroom. My friend, the Reverend John Russell Stanger, once said that pride is resurrection. Pride is resurrection into the hope of companionship and community. Pride is resurrection into loving your own flesh. Pride is resurrection into faith that you are created good and beautiful. What does resurrection look like? It looks like a sea of love period t-shirts marching down Fifth Avenue, making their way past the Stonewall Inn with a gospel choir singing one of the most theologically rich and robust hymns of the last century, the one that proudly proclaims, help me out here, we are family. Your part? There we go. Resurrection is being made whole, and we are made whole as we hold one another. A woman holding her son, feeling her place in society restored. A gay teen bruised from the way the Bible has been used, welcomed, accepted, celebrated for who they are, for who God has always made them to be. And when we say that we welcome and include and celebrate all people here at Middle, we also mean all ages. In a world that literally overlooks anyone who's under 4 feet tall, in a society that says your voice only matters if you can make a big enough contribution, in a school system that is systemically eliminating the arts, we echo the words of Jesus when we say, let the children come to me. We see you. We celebrate you. We hold you, and we discover you holding us in return. We discover resurrection in the voices, their words, their songs, in the costumes they'll wear this afternoon at their concert. This is what it means to practice resurrection, to be made whole. Now, it's one thing to think about being made whole for the widows marginalized in the first century society, or the work that we continue to do for the rights and the full inclusion of LGBTQ people, or for the systemic abandonment of young people that they encounter in the world today. But what about the parts of ourselves that don't always seem to fit under the latest banner of a social justice campaign? Yes, we want our wholeness on a systemic and societal level, but we also need wholeness on our individual levels as well. What does it look like for you to be made whole? Who is holding you? Who is making this resurrection a reality in your life? Now, I want to tell you a story. about a way that I have been held into wholeness. You see, I think it's important for you to know that your pastor is also a person. The sermons that we preach at Middle, they aren't some holier-than-thou divine wisdom. They are a lived reality, a shared experience. When I say that we are made whole by the people who are holding us, I say this from firsthand experience. A few months ago, my life drastically changed. Some of you may have heard this news, and to others, this will be the first time. Jess and I decided to end our marriage. It was a difficult and painful, but albeit amicable decision. Now, the details of the day that we had this conversation will be forever etched into my memory. It was a Friday morning. We sat on the couch eating everything bagels. I only made it a few bites in before I realized what this conversation meant. We're getting a divorce. Now, the story I want to tell you, it's not the story of why we ended our marriage. That's from my therapist. But I want to tell you the story of how I have been made whole by the people who hold me. So with a mostly uneaten bagel sitting on the table, I put on my running shoes, went out to the Riverside Park, and walked and ran and wept and texted my best friends who live 3 miles away from me. Mandy's at work, but we'll be home soon. This is Andy. I'm home now. Come on over. Have you eaten anything today? Just a couple bites of an everything bagel. I could use some food. I arrive at my best friend's apartment. I collapse into Andy's arms. I just ordered some Mexican food, he says. I didn't know what you wanted, so I got 3 different things. I spend the next few hours at his dining room table eating all the food, oscillating between silence and questions and words that attempt to capture what I'm feeling but don't know how to say. At about 2 in the afternoon, we leave Andy's apartment, heading uptown to pick up Ralph, his 10-year-old son, from school. We arrive just after school is out, and we join dozens of grown-ups waiting to collect their children. Ralph knows that his dad is coming, but he isn't expecting me. He sees his dad and begins heading our way. Then he notices me, and his walk turns into a sprint as he rushes up and gives me a hug that only a 10-year-old knows how to give, completely unaware of what my day has contained. And as he holds me, I find myself beginning to be made whole. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to have your life put together. You simply need to open yourself up to be held by the people around you. A hug from a 10-year-old makes all the difference. Because we are made whole, we experience resurrection by the people who hold us. Who is holding you? Who is helping you to be made whole? And how can you practice resurrection? Who can you hold? How can you bring this wholeness to the world around you? Now I want us to talk a bit about the puzzle going on over here. Can I see one of the pieces? 100-piece puzzle from the kids section. It's the hardest thing. Way to go, way to go. All right, you got about 4 more minutes. Let's see. Well, actually, let's call it good here. Why don't you guys go back to your seats? Give them a hand, give them a hand. Good work. Oh, look at that. Look at that, not that bad. I'm going to leave this right here, so after worship, you all are welcome to come up and put a piece or 2 into this puzzle, or try to, because it's the hardest puzzle in the world. But I want to talk for a minute about puzzles. The way a puzzle works is simultaneously simple, yet completely profound. Now, A puzzle is one single image, this is obvious to all of us, I know, made up of many different pieces, and the tabs on one piece are held together by the spaces on another. And when every piece is both holding and being held, only then is the image made whole. We are made whole by the people who are holding us. Middle, you see, we are the puzzle, and each of you is one essential piece, holding one another so that all of us can be made whole. We are the image of God, the image of love and justice, practicing resurrection as the outsider comes in, as the marginalized find themselves at the center, as you discover yourselves whole by the people holding you, as I discover myself being whole, made whole by the 10-year-old hugging me. You don't have to have it all figured out. There can still be some pieces you're like, I'm still working on this. Your life can still be a hot mess. You can be filled with faith and doubt, with more questions than you have answers, with more dead ends than ways forward. Just let yourself be held into wholeness. The people around you, in this very room, joining us online, we can hold one another. Messy, broken, beautiful, beloved. We hold the people around us. This is what it looks like to be living the resurrection. Or in the words of Mary Oliver, which is always a safe way to end a sermon, you do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about your despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese high in the clean blue air are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. Amen.